Greetings and salutations, everybody. This is another update from Ape in Space, where you get all of your Virgin Galactic news and stock information. Folks, I got a couple emails about the 3Q earnings meeting. Some people wanted to hear the question and answer portion of the call, so I'm going to put that up for you here.
So as we look to 2023, as you begin initial production on the Delta class spaceships, what are the key catalysts or moments in 23 that we should look forward to with respect to that? And more generally, as you perceive this flexible and agile approach to working with suppliers, are there other partnerships that you need in terms of scaling or that you have in mind? Second question is, previously you mentioned disruptions acquiring materials. Is that still happening? Or if you could tell us a little bit about how the supply chain looks, given we're in such a dynamic environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. This is Michael responding. I'll just take that last one. Well, I'd say supply chain for us and for everywhere still carries across the world, degrees of disruption. We've managed that disruption really, really well. So we don't have anything that is constraining us at the moment from a supply chain standpoint. It's still a disruptive market. We still look and manage proactively against it. So don't want to say that any company's out of the woods for that, but we don't see issues in that area right now. So that's good. As to the Delta ships, what you'll see, we're very excited to have Bell Textron and Carbon Aerospace on board, and I think those companies and the teams are also very excited to be partnering with us on this. It is a program where, as we said, we're going to take the lead on the upfront design and overall design authority. And what that means is we're going to have our engineers, especially some of our most experienced engineers with our ships, really working through the upfront design to basically modify, our existing ships design, same outer mold line as we've discussed, but modify them in a way such that Bell and Carbon can take those designs and then put them through their own shops, their own areas, and manufacture them in a very efficient way, in a very both time and cost efficient fashion. So things that we'll be doing, we have to get the design piece done, and there are milestones that we could work against internally for that. You'll see us, then we'll be ordering materials, and the materials will first be used to build the tooling that these partners will be using in the manufacturing process. And as we get the material order, then we'll get the tooling built, and then you'll see parts actually getting built using those toolings. And that's mostly what's going to be happening in the 23 timeframe. Doug, anything you'd add to that?
That was complete.
Thank you. And Michael, you have a really experienced, experiential team in terms of membership and marketing and driving a bigger consumer experience. Any updates there on plans and strategies in terms of what you're doing? And also related on the demand side with the encouraging campus and training facility announcements, what have you been seeing in terms of demand and regarding tickets? Thank you.
So I'd say we're generally following the path we've laid out, Oliver. So our design process on the astronaut campus continues. Again, we think that campus will be coming online kind of in parallel with the Delta ships coming on. Well, that's coming along quite well. I've spent time with some of our future astronauts, both in Europe, the UK, as well as in the US. They're just very pleased and excited to both be part of the company, but also looking forward to going to space. So we mentioned on this call, we had our first major event. Internally, we call it the Space for the Curious event. And I participated in that with 60 to 80 or so of our future astronauts and guests. And the main takeaway there is how important the journey is. And I think for all the people who attended that, as well as the dialogue I've been having kind of across the world with our future astronauts, it continues to come back and focus on this isn't an up and down, right? This is a journey, and the development of the milestones on that journey are incredibly important along the way. And what we really focused on in that Space for the Curious piece is helping people recognize how they're going to prepare so that the moments that are fairly fleeting in space will be so anchored in their memory when they come back that that's what they're going to carry forward for the rest of their lives. So it was very reinforcing to attend that event and to talk with these folks. So we feel like we're definitely on the right track there. Now on demand, as we shared in the last quarter's earnings calls, we had 800 or so people that had come in. We took 100 seats out of our first 1,000 block and repurposed and dedicated those to the research market. And that has been a good move on our part. You may recall the research groups can't plan for something that's 4 years out. They need the ability to make decisions for funding and for using their experiments on shorter timetables. So by able to reserve that 100 seats and basically be able to feather those in along the way, it's opened up our opportunity to talk to a lot more people. You may have noticed we announced a partnership on research with Axiom Space. That came out this morning. And they're going to use us to help train astronauts that they will be taking up to the space station on deeper exploration missions. So we found good momentum from countries, universities, Axiom in the case of today's example. So that's a good market. And then we have the bulk of the remaining of those first 1,000 seats off with Virtuoso. And I would imagine those tickets will get momentum through their large network of travel advisors as we start flying. So that's where I think we'll see the push there. And then as I said, we've carried a few house seats. So we've effectively, with that allocation to Virtuoso and research, have closed our efforts on sales at that $450,000 price point. We think that was a right piece to have for this moment. We were very successful with that. And then as we're back to space and flying again, we'll reopen for the next tranche of sales.
Hi, this is Eric Yan on for Matt. Thanks so much for the question. It looks like you guys used less cash than expected for the quarter. Is the higher Q4 number a good run rate to assume for next year? Maybe it's close to the peak now?
Thanks for the question. This is Doug. So we spent a little bit less in the third quarter than we projected, just like $3 million below the range we gave. But we are seeing that ramp in the fleet development. We've got both of the work going on the finishing of the enhancement period plus the ramp with Aurora on the next generation mothership. Those are the things that are layering in there. So we've guided for the fourth quarter to be 120 to 130 spending level, and that's because we're still finishing up the flight test period here, following the enhancement period, and then we've got the ramp of Aurora continuing, and then the introduction of the new suppliers for the Delta class. So you're seeing that trend. I've talked about before how these layers will combine. Next year, what you see is some ramp down on the initial fleet because we will have finished the enhancement period. We've moved into flight tests, or finishing it up, going into commercial service, and then the ramp up of the future fleet. So the net effect of that is some growth from where we are guiding for the fourth quarter, but we do see ourselves getting closer to our peak level of spend. So as these layers are coming in, that's kind of how it stacks up. So getting closer to that peak.
All right, thanks. If I can do one more, just like to know how many passengers are still in the backlog now. Is it still roughly 800-ish? Not sure if anyone has dropped out.
Yeah, Eric, so we were talking, we have 800 called future astronauts that had signed up before we took the called remaining seats and allocated 100 off for research, and then the bulk of the rest to Virtuoso. So we're kind of holding at that collective number of kind of those 1,000 at the 450,000 price point that we put out. And as we get back and start flying again, we'll reopen up from there.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. The next question today comes from the line of Christine Lewag from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead, your line is now open.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Nice to hear from you, Christine. How are you?
Great. So maybe following up on your announcement with that Bell will provide Delta's feathering system, you've got flight control surfaces, and Carbon Aerospace will do fuselage and wings. I mean, these are pretty important partnerships. Can you provide more color on the contract arrangement with these two suppliers? Will these be cost plus contracts for you, fixed price? Are they risk-sharing partners? What sort of investment and capital costs do you estimate this will be in 2023? And also, if you have a multi-year outlook, that would be better than just 2023.
Sure. Doug, well, I'll take a little bit of that and you can kind of pick up there. So probably as you would expect, the contracts are going to be a combination of time and materials when we are in periods where definition is still varying, which are these early phases right now, right, as we're kind of clarifying the design specificity with each other. And then we will move them into firm fixed price contracts as we lock down the design, and so the partners know what their job is with more specific detail in them. So that's how those will work, and just I think we'll move into the fixed price version of that when design is appropriately locked down, and that allows for time and materials in a place where we can work easily with each other to find the most efficient way forward, and people aren't trying to hedge to kind of cover bets because they don't know what's coming. So that's why we set up first T&M and then go into firm fixed price. Doug, you want to talk on either risk or other elements there?
Sure. So regarding the risk sharing, it's similar to what we did with Aurora. And yes, there's a risk sharing element to it where the suppliers are incentivized to go faster. And if things take longer or there's performance challenges along the way, there's some degradation in the price. So we're in it together, right, as a partnership. In terms of the cost, we aren't disclosing the cost, the run rates for 2023 or the cost per vehicle at this time, because for the reasons Michael mentioned, we're entering the design phase with them, and we lock down the design, and that from that specifies the remainder of the recurring costs that we'll see with the vehicles. So because that's an ongoing process with the vendors, it's really not in our best interest to put that out there publicly, what that is, because that's an ongoing interaction between all of us together. So for that reason, we don't disclose it, but hopefully that gives you enough color.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really helpful color. And it's great that you were able to line up these experienced manufacturers to help you build these very sophisticated flying machines, right, or space machines. So maybe in terms of the follow-up on cash, I mean, for 3Q22, you burned about $107 million. For 4Q, you're looking at the burn rate of $120 to $130 million. Is that the run rate we should expect leading up to the commercial service next year, or have you done the bulk of the work, and does that taper off leading into commercial service?
So we only give 1 quarter guidance on that, Christine. So we've got a midpoint of 125 for Q4. But what you'll see directionally as we go forward is probably still some growth because of the fact that we're still finishing up the flight test phase and getting ready for commercial service, while we're also ramping up the fleet expansion efforts, the fleet development with the outside vendors. So you've got kind of some layering on there, which directionally should drive costs a little higher. But as we get to commercial service, then you start to see some ramp down on the current fleet because we've finished that flight testing process and we're now in a sustainment mode and maintenance mode. And so that starts to come down, but at the same time, you've got the vendors ramping up. So that's how the different components should work together.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Christine. Good to hear from you. And yes, we are really excited to have both of these organizations on board with us. They bring facilities, they bring expertise, and they bring ideas on how to help us move quickly and cost effectively. And the leadership and their teams are all also really excited to be part of it. It's exciting work.
Thank you. The next question today comes from the line of Greg Conrad from Jefferies. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Good evening, Greg.
Hey, Greg. Good evening.
Hey, just to follow up on Bell and Carbon, I mean, those are obviously the major structural components, but when we just think about the out percentage are you through in kind of locking down the supply chain? And I know you're not disclosing costs, but, you know, through these discussions, you know, any indication of how the price of the vehicle's tracking with maybe internal plans?
Well, let's see. I think as far as the supply chain goes, while there will be obviously Bell and Carbon on their own will have further supply chains that they pull in on their side. From our standpoint, these are by far the large bulk for the Delta ship, as Aurora is, you know, the large bulk for the motherships. Like in Aurora's case, you know, we'll be bringing in engines from Pratt and, you know, some smaller elements. For the spaceships, the Delta class, outside of what Bell and Carbon will be doing, you know, examples of what we'll be doing in addition to the final assembly or what's involved in final assembly, we'll probably do the interiors, we'll bring the gear and install the gear, things like that. So the weighting of this is heavily to Bell and Carbon. And there will not be, we're not expecting any other major supplier or relationship that we need for the Delta spaceship. So that's great news.
Also regarding costs relative to our
costs. I'd say relative to our expectations, you know, first I'd say as Doug mentioned, we start these relationships in a time and materials basis so that we can kind of work through the design specificity with each other together, and then we move to firm fixed price. So we have to get through that process to really kind of lock that down. I'd say through the RFP process that we did and as part of our selection criteria with both Bell and Carbon, the pricing that they were looking for, which is ROM pricing at an RFP level, is consistent in the area that we had projected internally. So I think that was your question. So I'd say, yeah, we're still tracking in a consistent fashion there.
And Greg, I can add that, you know, we had our own parametric studies that we had done, and so we had you know, our projections of what these things would be, and yes, it's consistent, you know, materially consistent with what we thought it would be.
And then I might have missed it. I think you maybe mentioned it briefly. How are you thinking about the schedule for Imagine as of today? I mean, it seems like the first part of the schedule hasn't slipped, but how are you kind of thinking about that coming into the flight plan?
Yeah, so we put the emphasis on, number one, I'd say ensuring that Eve and Unity not only are flying, but have the engineering resources to fly on a consistent basis, as we said, and just make sure we have the ability to have the staff ready if there's anything we need to settle out in the early flights. At the same time, the economic momentum of the company is around the Delta ships. And we are the kind of first domino to fall internally of needing to get the engineering done up front to help get definition so that Bell and Carbon can get going. So those two things are really priority. What's consistent amongst both those two is they require not just engineers, they require the engineers that have the most history with our existing ships. And that is a limited resource. We have a large engineering pool, but we need to make sure we focus those deeply experienced engineers on those two things. Now it happens, a lot of those engineers are also the ones that will be in some of the flight testing phase for Imagine. So we're doing some resource prioritization there. And as we start to learn how quickly we'll be able to pull folks back from Eve and Unity and how quickly we'll move through some of these early design phases on Delta, that will influence how many people we get back onto Imagine. So what we said in the prepared remarks was we're reassessing Imagine's schedule. I can say that we will not be in 23 for commercial flight with Imagine. So I think we've kind of passed that mark, but kind of where it falls will depend on how quickly we're able to pull people back from Eve and Unity into Delta.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. The next question today comes from the line of Miles Walton from Wolf Research. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Thanks, good evening.
Hi, Miles.
Hey, I was wondering on the schedule for return to commercial service, Eve getting back in the air in early January, and then I heard a Unity glide flight, and then a Unity space flight, and then the Italian. Was the plan always to just have the one powered flight, and has the schedule compressed at all? I realized that the start of commercial services remains steady, but has the schedule compressed at all?
Schedule has not compressed, but what you are seeing is the flights, back following Unity 22 that we did with, kind of Richard and our internal team. We had planned 2 flights following that. One was going to be an internal flight. One was going to be the Italian Air Force research flight that we announced. And at that time, we were going to then go into this kind of modification enhancement period. What we've done is, as you know, we pulled the modification enhancement period, went into that first. So we're bringing back those same 2 flights that we planned before. What's additional is we're adding a glide flight of Unity, and that's primarily a verification flight because Unity had some upgrades to it, and Eve had some upgrades. So we want the whole space flight system to be able to go through. For those who aren't familiar on the call, a glide flight is where we bring the spaceship Unity up to altitude and release it, but instead of powering it to space with our propulsion system, the pilots take it through a series of maneuvers as they glide back to Spaceport America. That is the additional flight that we've put in the system. The other 2 are the same as we were before.
Okay, good. And I think in the queue it talks about, in this relationship, Virgin Galactic would continue to own the airworthiness certificate and award it for the manufactured product, which makes sense. But can you just remind us, the airworthiness certificate that goes along with the Delta class, how different is that versus what you currently carry for Unity?
Each vehicle will have kind of a in our world, it's a spaceship that functions as an air vehicle in the lower parts of the atmosphere. Each of these will have a reusable launch vehicle license, so each vehicle has its own license. But the FAA license to carry commercial passengers to space is an operating license, and while we will clearly kind of show the FAA the work we've done on Delta, our dialogues with them so far, we feel, each side feels these will all be part of that same license, so we do not expect having to create a new commercial license for the Delta ship. They'll fall under the same operations license, but each vehicle will need its own reusable launch certification.
Great. And then the last one was on, I know you said that the cash flow from R&D running hot was enhancement costs as well as future fleet. Is there any way, maybe, Doug, you could sort of break down how much is going to the future fleet today versus enhancement?
Today, I'll just say it's more on enhancement, but that's rapidly shifting to future fleet.
Okay. All right.
So if you were looking at Q3, it was more on enhancement. Now it's shifting over. Okay.
Thanks, Miles.
Thank you. The next question today comes from the line of Sam Strassecker from Truist Securities. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Hey, good evening, guys. I'm on for Mike Tremoli this evening. I was just curious, you guys mentioned kind of putting some engineering force behind your various initiatives. And I guess if you guys just elaborate, have you looked into adding any additional labor, or are you guys having any kinds of shortages there or anything like that? And then kind of on the same note, I think you said you're managing supply chain all right, but have you guys had any issues with pricing pressures? And if you could just add any detail there. Thank you.
Let me take the supply chain. We have not seen, I'll call it, pricing pressures. Sometimes, a miscellaneous part or something that's in demand, we may expedite from a shipping or expedite to kind of get ourselves to the front of the line. That's, I think, more like day in and day out of the supply chain world, but nothing, I'd call it, structurally that we've seen at this moment. I'm looking at Doug in case I'm missing something there.
No, the other factor is that the bulk of our costs are labor, not materials. So, labor is more fixed in terms of pricing. So even with the contractors and so on. So yeah, it really doesn't show up as a material thing for us, any supply chain cost changes.
And then I'd say on the engineering side, we have a great number of incredible engineers that are very smart. The number of those engineers that have historical experience with our ships is more limited because that came over the time kind of earlier in the company's time when our engineering core was smaller. And it's those more deeply experienced engineers that we have kind of three demands on their time. One of them is, as we put Even Unity into service, those are the people who are very familiar through the flight test program, and we just want them kind of on the job, particularly on site, ready to help us turn those ships. So that's one where we need that specific group. And then the design phase up front, as you would expect, you want to bring that deep expertise in. Once we get through some of the early design pieces, you get more larger groups of incredibly smart engineers, but who may not have as much historical expertise. It's that core that also is important for some of the early testing of Imagine. And so we want to make sure that we put focus on the first of those, two of those, Even Unity and Delta. And that's what's given us a little bit of schedule flexibility in what we're trying to think about with Imagine. So as I said, that will push us out of 2023, but it's for that specific cadre of engineers.
Great. And then if I could just sneak in one more. You guys, I think, mentioned that the production on the Delta class would begin in 2023. Is there any way you could give any more detail on kind of when, if that would be more back half or not?
I don't think we're kind of at the point where we're putting specifics out on that. However, we will follow a fairly standard process that will go through from design up front. As design is completing and we get certain parts of that ahead, we are able to start tooling exercises, right? So you design the tools and then you can order the material for the tools and you can then build the tools. That tooling exercise can happen as design is completing on some of the more detailed efforts. And then you go into actually, manufacturing process there. So if you think about that sequence, you can probably make some assessments on that, but that's probably the right level of discussion at this stage.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by 1 on your telephone keypad. The next question today comes from the line of Anthony Valentini from Goldman Sachs. Please go ahead, your line is now open.
Hey guys, this is Anthony on for Noah. How are you?
Hi, Anthony. Welcome. We're well.
Thanks for taking my question. I just want to go back to the reservations for a minute. It sounds like the reservations are closed at this point in time, but is the sales process also completely closed at a full stop halt, or do you guys still have people out there that are drumming up business for future customers?
Yeah, so just kind of both for you, but also for anybody who's listening. So we have a backlog of tickets that have been already sold that's greater than 3 years. And so those are obviously the people that we want to be flying to space along the way. And so, kind of as mentioned earlier, that's where we are building to the 800 so we have, and then the 100 research flights. And then kind of to your question here, we've got a number of those remaining 1,000 that we've allocated with a luxury and adventure travel partner, Virtuoso. Those folks, I think, will be putting their energy towards this as we go back to flight. That will be, from my old world, that would probably be the most efficient way for them to go at that. But these are, again, we've got, kind of pushing towards 4 years of backlog along the way. So it's, from that standpoint, we've kind of, closed the $450,000 price point. Virtuoso's tickets that they'll be selling will be at that $450,000 piece. So at this point, then, if people are coming in, we're obviously, taking those names. We will add them to the interest list to come online as well, and make sure that we're ready to follow up when we do reopen things up. And we also have kept some house seats, so when we get referrals from our existing future astronaut corps, we have the ability to bring some of those folks in as well. Sometimes that's with, hey, I'd like to bring a family member, or somebody else's, things start to get real for them. So we want to keep a few tickets available for that. But then as we get back to flight and we are flying again, then we'll reopen up sales. And so our effort for our sales team right now is primarily structured on what are the kind of the sales infrastructure and mechanisms that we will use as we need to scale sales up at higher levels as we get closer to the deltas coming online. So this is a good time period for us to get that work done.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. It makes sense. I'm curious in terms of just like the trend, color, and information on people that are coming to you with interest. Have you guys seen that slowing as there's been, recessionary fears, stock market decline, business profits down, things like that?
We have even talked just to our existing core, right? We're generally maintaining the existing base. Everybody is impacted by world events, companies and individuals. For the most part, the people who are coming at these kind of early phases have the economic capacity to do so. But undoubtedly, everybody pays attention when markets are going up and down and things like that. So with kind of this near 4-year backlog, it's not really the concern for us at the moment. We're more focused on what's the infrastructure going to be as we begin our flights back to space and taking that momentum to really ramp the sales. And we've got a little bit of time for that. So hasn't been the economy and the world events have not, I'd say, be a weighting factor on us. But we will look to kind of, get back focused on sales as we get back to flight.
Okay, great. Last one for you here on supply chain. You guys touched on it, but I'm curious if there's like any specific parts you guys are seeing that require longer lead times or anything like that. A lot of companies that we're hearing that are in A&D generally are really harping on the fact that the supply chain has taken a major hit here. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts.
A lot of what we've got going on right now is, carbon. And we have that. We had some issues that we were concerned about with some of the thermal protection system materials we used, and that took some scrambling to pull shipments in from Australia because that had been sole sourced out of Ukraine, as an example. I think things that are very particular types of metals, metallics, that are used in aerospace can be tricky. So we had some work to do on a certain type of aluminum that we needed that was there that took us a while to get to. And so those were some of the earlier things we faced. But at this point, we've kind of worked through those, and the things that we're working on in the near term have not been problematic for us at that point. Doug, anything you've seen?
Nothing that I would mention beyond that. Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you. There are no further questions registered, so this concludes today's question and answer session and today's conference call. Thank you all for your participation.
All right, guys, tell me in the comments below if you had any different questions that you would have liked to hear asked of the board, and let me know if the questions that were asked was something you were interested in. Did the answer satisfy your curiosity? That'll be your update for today. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and click that notification bell. Also, there's some links below if you want some free stocks. Until next time, my friends, continue being excellent to each other and be well.